bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to tonight's broadcast, coming to you live from downtown historic Oliver Springs, Tennessee. Today, of course, is September 11th, 2013. We are exactly 12 years removed from the attacks on the World Trade Center, which took down the Twin Towers. And it's definitely a time for us to look back and reflect. We are also exactly 1 year past the attacks in Benghazi, and still no real answers. A lot of us have theories and conjecture. A lot of us are pretty sure we know what's going on. A lot of us are pretty sure that this whole hot to go into Syria thing has a lot to do with Benghazi, trying to cover up the fact that our occupier, our great non-leader, was up to his elbows in recruiting Al-Qaeda and arming Al-Qaeda and sending them from Libya into Syria, supplanting the real Free Syrian Liberation Army, whatever they called themselves, the folks that actually were the rebels in an attempt to unseat Mr. Assad. And in their place, Al-Qaeda, with the help of the Muslim Brotherhood, foreign fighters. It's not even fair to call it a civil war anymore. It's not fair to call these people rebels anymore. There are still a few small factions that may very well be. But this has a lot to do with what's going on as a result of September 11th. Back in 2001, I remember exactly where I was when I first heard that the Twin Towers had come down, and I am quite certain that almost everyone who happens to be an American remembers exactly where they were when they first heard about the towers coming down. Now, there's no way to adequately express what it really meant to see the towers come down if you had never been there. Now, I, of course, grew up here in East Tennessee. But business has taken me on multiple occasions to New York City. I had an opportunity on a couple of occasions during business trips, free time, actually get to the top of the Twin Towers. And I have to tell you, if you were never there, you just can't possibly imagine how much steel and concrete and glass that we're really talking about. If you have been there, then you had to have been facing the same type of shock and awe and amazement. The very idea that even two jumbo planes could crash into these things and make them fall is an astounding idea, because these things were built to withstand. The fact that it had withstood bombings previously. I mean, it was not the first time that Islamic fundamentalist extremists had attempted to attack the World Trade Center. A lot of folks may not even necessarily remember that now, but tried to use some trucks filled with explosives to explode in the basement. And that didn't even put a dent in the foundation. These things were built to last. Good old-fashioned American engineering and know-how and craftsmanship. People might want to throw off on those ideas and those concepts this day and age. Well, that is their loss, and they are very short-sighted in the process. Because we learned some lessons from 9/11. Now, I know some of the folks out there are still all about the conspiracy theory. Still believe that it was an inside job, or that these towers couldn't have fell the way that they did, especially building number 7. But regardless of whether you buy into any of that, the bottom line is we did learn 2 very important lessons that day. Lesson number 1, all you had to do was pay attention. For several months after that attack, generally speaking, in the public, we were all simply Americans. There were no Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, black, white, Hispanic, Asian. There were none of these divisions. All the things that divided us as Americans were put aside. We were ready to stand up and, number 1, rebuild, and number 2, go out there and kick some butt for whoever was responsible for trying to attack us. Because, number 1, New Yorkers are tough, and number 2, Americans, period, are tough. Sometimes, unfortunately, we forget that. We're constantly being pushed into forgetting exactly how tough, how creative, how determined we as Americans can be and actually are. We were reminded then. And in fact, we did not even begin to lose any of that cohesion when we rallied around each other until, unfortunately, the Democrats decided, you know what, we've got to put an end to this cohesion or we won't be able to win any elections coming up. I've heard it said that the late Edward Kennedy actually was the first person to come out, make that statement, and start putting the first shots across the bow. Now that may be an accurate assessment, or that could be someone simply speaking ill of the dead. I certainly will tell you this much, from what I know of Mr. Kennedy's politics, I wouldn't put it past him. But that very thing really brings us to 2 points. Point number 1, Americans can put aside those differences. We can do it. Today, we have never been as divided, rather it be racially or economically, regardless of whether it's a socioeconomic thing or simply a matter of race, religion, or even politics. We've never been as divided as we are right now, except maybe in the years leading up to the American War of Succession. Some of you government-educated folks may still think of it as the American Civil War, but that obviously is not an accurate description. We've had discussions about that both here and on the other show at Blog Talk. And in fact, I let one of my guests just this past Sunday, Mr. Brent Williams, go ahead and define that himself, because he had made a statement during the course of one of the things he was doing, talking about how there had never been a bloody civil war on this continent, and we could ill afford one. So I gave him the opportunity to explain that statement, because there are still a lot of people, that's what they're taught in school, so they don't know any better. Oh, it's the American Civil War, that's what we'll call it. It wasn't a civil war, folks. The South wasn't trying to take over the Northern government. The Southern states were simply trying to secede from the Union. They wanted to be their own government. They weren't trying to take over the other. So, by definition, it's not a civil war. Regardless, beside the point, if we were that divided then, we may be close to being that divided now. But even then, I don't know. Based on accounts and reports, if you look, you read the papers, you delve into the material of the time, actually look at letters, read newspapers, any bit of real information that's left over from the time, there were definitely very deep divides. There's no question about it. But the real question is, were they as divided then as we are now? Well, it's a real shame that we're in that point, because just 12 years ago, on this day, it started and it lasted for a period of several months. We were united as Americans. Everything else was secondary. For a lot of us, if there was something else that would get in the way of standing together, it was put out the door. We didn't even let it inside our homes. We didn't let it inside our hearts or our minds. We were Americans first. We were not going to put up with being attacked by anyone. No one was going to hit us right here in our homeland. Nobody was going to get away with that. So point number one, we don't have to be this divided. We've shown that in the face of adversity, time and time again, not just on this occasion, we have shown in the face of adversity, we as Americans will stand together, and we don't care what color the person is that's getting the help when they need it. We don't care what religion the person is when they need help, when we send it. All we want to do is make sure that our fellow Americans get the help they need and deserve, and we're willing to volunteer our time, give up our money, give up items that we've been wanting and saving for. We've done this over and over again. People who can't afford to give anything will give something to help someone else that they see are in need, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane or wildfires, bombings, airplanes crashing into giant trade towers. It's all the same to us Americans in need. We're ready to answer the call. We always have been. Unfortunately, the second point that this story tells you is that our political aristocracy, our career politicians, our people that we send to D.C. and that we keep sending back over and over again, regardless of how badly they bend us over, if you'll forgive the crudeness, there is nothing more important to those people, and this goes for both the left and the right. So it was the Democrats that ruined this particular time of unity, but if the shoe was on the other foot, if the Democrats had been in charge at the time and they had rallied the troops, and I don't know that they would have or could have, because a lot of our leftist folks are so much anti-war, yellow-bellied freaking polecats these days, but that's another story, and I'll digress from it. It wouldn't have mattered. It would have been the Republicans that would have done it if it was flipped around. I mean, there's make no mistake about it. The people that are in D.C., the top of the food chain in our political class, there is nothing more important to them than maintaining their power base or increasing their power base, doing whatever it is that they think needs to be done in order for them to get stronger and have more power over us, the little people. Those are the two lessons. I hope people were paying attention. I hope people are still paying attention. We are past a point in time where it makes any sense anymore for us not to be paying attention. There were a lot of beautiful pictures posted all over social media, whether you are on Facebook or TeaPartyCommunity.com or Patriot Space or FreedomWorks, whatever social media site you might have been on, whether you were on Twitter, certainly no shortage of pictures on Pinterest. Imagine that. No matter where you were at, social media was ablaze with people remembering today. So let me take this moment, this particular point in time, to ask you, if you hear this, even if you're listening to this 2-3 days later, a week later, if you just stumble upon this 5 years from now, because hopefully this will still be where you can access it and listen to it should you choose to. Let me ask you to take a moment right now, if you haven't already, to spend just a few moments reflecting on the tragedy that was the attacks on the Twin Towers. Not focusing on all the negative aspects or the angering aspects, which, you know, if you're an American and you understand that we were attacked because we're prosperous, that's why they chose a symbol of our economic strength, although one could raise questions about our economic strength, especially under the current economy. But they chose a symbol. Innocent people were victims of an attack that day. I want you to put out of your mind, even though I'm going to mention it specifically, which kind of seems counterintuitive to wanting you to put it out of your mind, but put out of your mind the scenes of people dancing in the West Bank and the people who claim to be Palestinians who are really just former Jordanian refugees who were booted out because they kept trying to overthrow the royal family then. The people that were dancing in the streets throughout the Muslim world, I would say the Arab world, but, you know, that's a misnomer. Not every Arab is Muslim. And I certainly don't give any breaks to Islam, but the truth of the matter is that not every Muslim wants to kill Americans. Not every Muslim believes that they're supposed to be going out and killing all the infidels if they won't convert. Problem is, there's way too many of them that do believe that, and when they're still a minority, they go around pretending like they're not, even though they are, so you never really know which ones are which. So that's the problem. But put all that out of your mind. Put all of that out of your mind. We can think about that later. I want you to take a few moments, though, to reflect on the fact that there were husbands and wives and children and parents and grandparents, both Americans and a large number of British citizens and other foreign nationals that were working that day, attending meetings that day, who lost their lives simply because they went to work. Families were ripped apart. A group of Americans on board one of those hijacked planes decided to take a stand, put themselves at risk, did what they had to do to keep that particular plane from reaching its target, and managed to crash it before it got somewhere where it could have done damage. Those common, average, ordinary citizens also showed us what Americans are really about, what the real spirit of America is, and that is we see an issue, we adapt, we overcome, we don't whine about how hard it's going to be, we don't worry. Well, that's probably not true. I was going to say we don't worry about what the cost will be when we see that a job needs to be done. I'm sure those people were well aware of what the cost would be, that they might very well just die in the attempt of trying to take that plane back and be unsuccessful. But they were willing to take that risk because they were afraid of what the cost would be otherwise. They were willing to sacrifice themselves to save countless others that they had no idea who they would even be. Also, back at the site of the World Trade Towers, the first responders that arrived, that were there before the towers came down, who lost their lives simply because they were doing their job. When everyone else is running away, they go towards the danger. New York's finest that day were at their finest. And whether you're talking about the thin blue line or the thin red line, because the firefighters that were there and lost their lives, again, those people are the very definition of American heroes. Every time you want to go to a movie and you expect your hero to be wearing a cape, you need to stop and think about the fact that real heroes in this country wear helmets and badges and heavy breakout gear and oxygen tanks, and they go rushing into places that you simply should not be. The families of the people who lost their lives that day are still grieving. So today, we take a little bit of time out to honor the memory of those lives lost and to let those people who survived know that they will not be forgotten. No matter what the folks over at Al Jazeera believe we should do. In the last broadcast over here at Spreaker, one of the 3 stories that I covered was the fact that there was an op-ed piece in Al Jazeera English, which is a print version or online version or some whatnot version of the new Al Jazeera America, which in and of itself is sickening. The fact that Al Jazeera is running a network here in the States. Once again, Al Gore proves to us what a great and true leader he is. Thank God he did not get elected. Because not only did he hook up with the MoveOn.org loons, but he proved himself to actually be loonier than they were. Turned his greed into a environmentalist crusade. It's actually okay for you to do the carbons. Just pay me some money and we'll plant a tree for you and that'll make it okay. Meanwhile, the Gore compound outside of Nashville, which, he still doesn't spend a whole lot of time there, mind you, but he still spent more time in Tennessee than he had for the decade plus before running for president, since he had been in D.C., and he was really a resident of D.C. than a Tennessean at that point. But his compound just outside of Nashville actually uses almost twice the electricity that the entire city of Nashville did. Throw on top of that all the petrol that was necessary to fly his private jet everywhere he was going. To come tell us that we need to turn the lights out and not have the AC on, and we should all be driving electric cars because, well, I guess if we all did that, then that would mean there would be more gas and electricity for him. The inconvenient truth is that he is a freaking asinine, pompous jackass who conned a bunch of people into giving him money to plant a tree that probably was going to get planted anyway, as far as that goes. Here's your carbon credit. And then what does he do when he's ready to get out of current TV? Which, anybody with a brain knew that the business model was flawed at the beginning. Nobody watches liberal programming all of the time. Hell, even on the radio, NPR couldn't survive without government supplemental cash. If you were to take the government money away from NPR, it would be gone inside of 2 months. It really would. But what does he do when he's ready to get out? This was right before Glenn Beck made his departure from Fox News when he was looking at starting The Blaze. Well, Al Gore made an offer. Pretty decent offer from what I understood. I don't recall what the number was right off. Made an offer to buy Current TV once Al made sure that everyone knew that it was for sale. Nope, wouldn't sell it to Glenn Beck. Nope, can't be seen to do business with you. What did he end up doing? He sold it to Al Jazeera. Primarily still funded out of Saudi Arabia, primarily using oil dollars. Ooh, the green agenda, once again well served by the Gore. Al Jazeera wants us to forget about 9/11. They did the op-ed piece. I covered that story in the last broadcast. But no matter what any member of Al Jazeera, any of our enemies, any of the people on the political left, and unfortunately sometimes our enemies and the people on the political left are the same people, no matter what they want, no matter what they say, we shall never forget what happened that day, and we shouldn't. Good Americans lost their lives. Good British citizens lost their lives, all because they were doing their jobs. They weren't trying to create any type of foreign policy. They weren't protesting a mosque being built somewhere in New York. They weren't even thinking about causing trouble, as far as I know. I mean, you never really know what goes on in some of these meetings. Some of those businesses could have been run by evil corporations. So, who knows? Maybe some of them were. But the bottom line was, these people, all they did that day is they went to work. And the same thing can be said for all the first responders that lost their job. Only the difference was, lost their lives, I'm sorry. They were doing their jobs. Difference was, by the time they showed up to do their job, the crap was already hitting the fan. That's what makes them heroes. So, kind of hard while you're listening to the show, I'm sure, to take that moment. But if you have not, by the time you hear this, please take a few moments just in quiet reflection. And, if you happen to be religious at all, say a prayer for the souls who lost their lives, and for the families that were left behind that still struggle every single day with the loss of that loved one who just went to work that day. Going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to continue talking about September 11th. Only we're going to talk about what's actually going on September 11th in the year 2013. We'll be right back.
Tap
Into the Truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth, right here on Spreaker Radio. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, right here on Spreaker, and that's really all I should have said instead of Spreaker Radio. Still not real sure what I was thinking when I did that promo and added radio at the end. Just felt right. Also, if you're interested and have the appropriate technology, you also can find this broadcast along with the Blog Talk version of the show on iTunes. I will also be moving the player shortly after this over to tapintothetruth.com. If you haven't already checked us out, please feel free to give us a look while you're at it. If you have already seen it, check us out again. We do change the content, or I should say I change the content ever so often. I don't spend as much time on it as I would like. But I do try to keep updated, important videos. I try to keep on the homepage. I'll switch out some of the videos. It's about time for me to actually get in there and do a little bit of remodeling there as well. I need to get a new blog written in regards to today and those 2 points that I was talking about earlier. Time has not permitted to this point. However, I had every intention when I got up this morning of doing exactly that. So I will be doing it. Also, I would like to remind everybody, if you missed this past Sunday's Blog Talk show, please feel free to check it out. It was a particularly good show, had 3 separate guests. We were talking about Syria at the top of the hour with Dr. Sharon Schutz, one of the co-founders of Lady Patriots, a fast-growing conservative news website filled with opinion and fact, and, well, there's a reason why it's growing as fast as it is. It's just flat-out good. Then I was joined by Randy Anderson, and she is the lady that created and organized the Leave Your Porch Light On for Landon. And in Landon Wells' case, he is a 5-year-old boy, lived in Spring City, Tennessee, had family here in Harriman, Tennessee, which is here in Roane County, and unfortunately he died as a result of child abuse. And there is still indication, although police investigation has not yet said that there's much indication. There was still a lot of indication from family members that a lot of the child abuse probably spurned from drug abuse. At any rate, Randy had organized the event just to show a sign of support and solidarity to the grieving family members, and I had her on rather than anybody from the family, out of respect for the family, letting them grieve. And it was really a nice event, and it was based on the premise that there was going to be a candlelight vigil, and for the folks that could not attend that, it was another opportunity to show support, and it went national, and it was nice. And then in the second hour, which is the hour that I'm sure the majority of the folks that listen to this show would be most interested in, the owner-operator of Frontier Firearms and political activist Mr. Brant Williams was on for almost the entirety of the second hour. And we covered a wide variety of topics. And Brant is very opinionated, but he is also very good at expressing himself. And I think he acquitted himself very well. I would encourage you to check it out. If nothing else, check to the player, move it up to the second half, and listen in there. It was really a very good show. So I would recommend you check that out. And again, that is available on iTunes as well. And you can also find it on Stitcher.com or TuneIn.com. So a wide variety of methods to get a hold of this particular show. Now, I mention that because I also would like to mention the fact that today we had the 2 Million Biker Rally that made its way into Washington, D.C. Mr. Brent Williams actually was participating in that. That's part of what my segue was in with that. My mental segue. I thought I would explain it to you guys. He was my second hour guest Sunday, and he was participating, riding his motorcycle, American flag on one side, and the famous "Don't Tread on Me" flag on the other side of his bike. Now, official numbers have not come out. Estimates range anywhere from just a little over 1 million to right about 1.5 million. Motorcycle enthusiasts, we'll call them, American patriots, I'll call them, actually rode into D.C. as part of this. Now, a lot of you probably already know, but for those of you who don't, this particular rally actually started out as a counter-protest to the Million Muslim March that was also scheduled for today in D.C. A large group of Muslims seem to think that they've been victimized as a result of the September 11th attacks back in 2001, and they don't feel like anything has really improved much. So they were going to protest it, and they were calling upon all of those wronged Muslims to show up. And they were given a permit, by the way, so they got to hang out and have their protest at the park that they wanted to have it at. Isn't that just awesome? And as a result, well, a bunch of bikers got to talking about it and decided, you know what, they couldn't stand for the memories of the fallen in this particular incident to be pushed aside, and this to be made about whining that you've not been treated fairly. So it started out essentially as a counter-protest, but it really changed and it grew into something different. It really basically became about honoring the memory of those folks that fell that day. The Americans that, as I've said many times already today, and will probably say a few more times before the show's over, did nothing more than go to work. People who lost their lives that day as a result of someone else's ideology. See, I used the term that these were innocent people that lost their lives that day, but in the minds of the people behind this, there are no innocent Americans. There are no innocent British citizens. We're all the evil Satan. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't particularly feel like Satan. In fact, I have days when I feel like a little troublemaker, but I've never felt like I've made that full-fledged Satan bit. And I really don't understand how, in comparison, someone who puts on a suit and tie every day and goes to a big fancy building compared to someone who's willing to strap on a stick of dynamite, walk into a crowd of people they don't know, and blow themselves up. Which one seems more like Satan to you? But, these people, they would kill all of us. In that counts, whether you believe the official story and it was the Muslims, or if you are wearing your tinfoil hat and have that freak flag flying full and you think it was an inside government globalist takeover kind of thing, This statement holds true regardless. The people behind this killed these people because they have a different ideology. Period. That's all it came down to. This was an act of evil, regardless of who you think pulled it off, whatever. You can agree with me on this. This was an act of evil. Anyone that cannot agree that this was an act of evil, you're the kind of people we need to be watching out for. Anyway, the point about the two protests, the rallies today, the Million Muslim March on D.C., they were given their permits. They were allowed in, according to the largest estimate that I've seen so far. And please understand, I'm not giving any credibility to CNN or MSNBC. So I'm not going to take their estimates. But the largest estimates I've come across, other than that, put it at about 400 to 500 people showed up. Ooh, 400 to 500. That's not 1,000. It's not 400,000. So they didn't even get anywhere close to 1 million. But they got their permits. Well, what did the bikers get? Told they would not be allowed to get a permit because of the logistical nightmare. Ordinarily, if they were to have gotten their permit, what they would have done was been given a clear path. Roads would have been closed. They would have been given a police escort. They would have got to drive through the area, and then they would have been led right out, and it would have been over. It would have taken probably about, given the number of people that actually showed up, probably about 2 hours. Because it would have been no stopping at traffic lights. It would have been none of that stuff. It would be like just these very nearly 2 million bikers who showed up and participated from all across the country. God bless every single one of you. But it just took a couple of hours. But without the permit, there was no special allowances made. So these guys, they went ahead and rode anyway. And that just meant that they did indeed have to stop at every traffic stop and had to just be part of the normal flow of traffic. And if you think that didn't cause way more trouble than it would have been just to give them an escort, let me tell you, that's wrong. Hopefully I'll be able to get a full report from one of the participants in the not too distant future. But in the meanwhile, I would really love to know, since they've had similar events before, what were these people thinking, not letting these bikers have the permit and giving them the escort and getting them in town and out of town as quickly as possible, as easily as possible? Why did the Muslims get their permit? I mean, these aren't just your everyday run-of-the-mill, we just want to get along Muslims. These were the rabble-rousing Muslims that, oh, you treat us so bad. Allah will get you infidels. I mean, that's what they did. They gave permits to one side that, are just basically whining. And then the folks that came there and said, you know what, we're going to honor the memories of these people. Nope, sorry, can't do it. And we are willing to mangle our traffic for the whole freaking day to prove the point that we're not going to give you any special recognition. Man, things are messed up in D.C. You get inside the Beltway, and it is just a different world. You think things are bad in New York or in California as far as the liberals being in charge? You get inside the Beltway, and there's supposed to be relatively even numbers there. Both parties shows you that the party doesn't mean as much as the ideology. At any rate, it's winding down. I want to say, if you haven't taken that moment, please do take a moment of just silent remembrance of the fallen and say a prayer for those lost souls and for their families that have to carry on. Remember, we are also 1 year out from Benghazi, and we have to keep fighting for justice. We cannot forget. Beyond that, there's so much more I would love to say. Time constraints being what they are, I just don't have the chance. So remember, don't take my word for it. definitely don't take their word for it. Do your own research. Use your brain. Always be prepared to dig a little deeper so that you can tap into the truth. Have a great night, everybody. God bless.